When we think of the first Christian writings, we usually think of the Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But what if I told you that the oldest surviving document we have from the Christian faith isn't a history book at all? It's something much more raw. Today, we're diving into First Thessalonians, and let me tell you, it's this incredibly urgent, deeply personal letter, born out of a crazy mix of profound anxiety and, believe it or not, absolute joy. I mean, really think about that question for a second, because that's exactly what's going on here. This isn't just some dusty old letter. No, this is crisis communication, plain and simple. It's an urgent dispatch from the Apostle Paul. And get this, he was literally chased out of town and is now just stewing, miles away, absolutely sick with worry that this new little community he just started is about to be completely wiped out before it even gets off the ground. All right, so let's get right into the incredible story behind this letter. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the wild 30-day birth of this church. Then we'll really feel the anxiety Paul was going through. After that, we get to the good part, this stunning report that just changes everything. And finally, we'll unpack the survival guide he sends them. Seriously, it's this incredibly practical, hope-filled guide on how to live, how to love, and even what happens when we die. All right, so where does all this drama and hope even start? Well, it all kicks off in a city called Thessalonica. And you've got to understand, this was no sleepy backwater town. Not at all. So picture this. It's around 50 AD, and Thessalonica is a major player in the Roman Empire. It's the capital of Macedonia, a buzzing multicultural hub sitting right on the Via Egnatia. Think of it as the Roman interstate, connecting everything from Rome to the east. Now, technically, it was a free city, so they had a little bit of self-rule. But let's be real. Roman culture, Roman power, and especially the worship of the Roman emperor, that was the very air everyone breathed. And into this total powder keg walk Paul and his buddy Silas. And in just 1 month, 30 days, the whole thing just explodes. They start preaching about a totally different kind of king, a Jewish man named Jesus, the one executed by Rome, who they say is now alive and ruling. And what's wild is people actually listen. A ton of Jews and Greeks buy in, and boom, a brand new church is born. But just as fast as it started, bam, violent opposition erupts. Paul and Silas get accused of treason and have to literally run for their lives. Okay, so for these new believers, you have to understand, this wasn't like changing your favorite sports team. This was a massive deal. Paul says they turned to God from idols. And in a city like Thessalonica, man, that phrase is like lighting a stick of dynamite, socially and economically. I mean, their entire world was woven together by worshiping the traditional gods. Think about it. Your job? It was probably tied to a trade guild, kind of like an ancient union. And that guild had its own special god and temple. Your social life, your family parties, your business deals, everything was connected to this system. So to just turn your back on idols, you were risking your job, getting shunned by your neighbors, maybe even your own family. It was potential economic disaster. But believe it or not, it gets even more dangerous than that. The real flashpoint, the one thing that could get you arrested or worse, it all boiled down to one single politically explosive word. And that word was Kyrios. In Greek, it means Lord. But here's the thing. Back in the 1st century, Lord wasn't just some general religious term. No, it was the official title for Caesar. It was stamped on coins. Caesar is Lord. The entire state religion was built on the idea that Caesar was this divine guy who brought peace and security to the whole world. So you can imagine what happened when this tiny new group of Jesus followers started gathering and saying, no, Jesus is curious. Whoa, they weren't just making some private spiritual statement. This was a public political declaration. They were pledging allegiance to a different king. And in the Roman Empire, there's a word for that, treason. The big takeaway here is that for these first Christians, faith wasn't just some quiet personal thing. It was a loud, public, and incredibly dangerous declaration of who was really in charge. So let's switch gears for a second. Can you even imagine what's going through Paul's head? He's been run out of town, forced to abandon these brand new believers, people he calls his own spiritual kids, and leave them to face this firestorm all by themselves. He's totally cut off, right? He's only hearing bits and pieces, just rumors of how much they're suffering. And he is just tormented by this one question. Did I just lead these people into something that's going to get them completely crushed? He's wondering, is their faith going to survive this insane pressure, or are they just going to give up to save their own skins? And you can just feel his heart breaking in the words he uses. It's so emotional. He doesn't sound like some rigid, distant leader. He actually says, "We were gentle among you, like a nursing mother caring for her own children." I mean, wow. That's an image of such tenderness and vulnerability. It's just pure, life-giving love. Then he pulls out this incredibly rare and powerful Greek word, apophanistans. He says when he was torn away from them, he felt orphaned. That's the cry of a parent who's had their kids ripped away, or a kid who's lost their parents. And this is so important. This letter comes from a place of deep, personal love and gut-wrenching anxiety, not from some ivory tower. So Paul just can't take it anymore. The suspense is eating him alive. So what does he do? He sends his trusted friend, Timothy, on a really dangerous mission back into the heart of the city to get a report. And what Timothy comes back with? Well, it's absolutely shocking. It's the last thing Paul expected to hear. Because Timothy doesn't come back with a story of failure or fear. It's not a report that they've all given up. Instead, it's a report of stunning, almost miraculous resilience. They weren't just hanging on by a thread, they were actually flourishing. In the middle of all this persecution, their faith was becoming known all over the region. Their love for each other was getting stronger. Their hope in Jesus' return was rock solid. Yeah, they missed Paul like crazy, but their community was absolutely thriving. So that's what 1 Thessalonians is. It's basically Paul's relief and joy just exploding onto the page. He's not writing to tell them what they're doing wrong. He's writing to celebrate them, to cheer them on, and yeah, to clear up a couple of questions they had. And this isn't just some sloppy, quick note. Paul actually structures this letter beautifully, almost like a song. It starts and ends with these powerful prayers. In the middle, you have two main sections. The first half is all about celebrating them, and the second half is a challenge to go even deeper. It's really a masterclass in how to lead and encourage people. Okay, so let's get into that second half. This is where Paul gets super practical. The big question is, how do you actually live as a follower of King Jesus when you're stuck in the middle of an empire that's basically the opposite of everything he stood for? And his advice just highlights how totally countercultural this new way of life really was. He calls them to holiness, especially when it comes to sex. I mean, in Roman culture, sexual exploitation and just using people as objects was completely normal. But Paul says, nope. He calls them to an ethic that's all about honoring the other person in a committed marriage. Then he calls them to love. And for him, love looked like working hard, not just to get rich, but so you could take care of yourself and have enough left over to be generous. You see, this wasn't just a list of rules. It was a blueprint for building a community that looked completely different from the world around it, a place where people were valued, not used. But then Paul pivots. He turns to what was obviously the community's most pressing, most painful question, a question born out of their own grief. So in the short time since Paul left, some of their members had already died. And given all the persecution, it's pretty likely some of them were martyrs. So their friends and family are heartbroken and confused. They're asking, hey, we were all holding out for Jesus to return, but what about our loved ones who died before that could happen? Did they miss out? Was it all for nothing? Now, what Paul says next is so important. This is not a complicated flowchart of the end times. His main goal here is pastoral. It's all about bringing comfort and hope. And to do that, he uses this incredible political image that every single person in that city would have immediately understood. He uses the Greek word Parousia. Now, today, we think of it as a religious term, but back then, its everyday meaning was political. A parousia was the official royal visit of an emperor to a city. When the emperor got close, a group of citizens would go out of the city to meet him, and then they'd escort him back into the city as this huge, grand welcoming party. So here's the big aha moment. When Paul talks about believers meeting the Lord in the air, he's not talking about some escape plan away from earth. He's using that parousia imagery. We are the royal welcoming committee going out to greet our returning king, Jesus, and escorting him back to this world as he comes to set up his kingdom of justice and peace. And here's the most comforting part for them. The believers who already died, they get a front row seat. They're at the very head of the parade. And this whole idea of Jesus as the true king who is coming back, that's the ultimate anchor of hope Paul gives them. It completely reframes their reality, and it exposes the big lie that the Roman Empire was built on. See, Paul goes right after Rome's most famous propaganda slogan, peace and security. He basically says that Rome's peace is a total sham. It's a peace that's enforced with crosses and slavery and military might. But the kingdom of Jesus, that brings real peace and real justice. And it doesn't do it through violence, but through self-giving love and service. He warns them that when King Jesus finally does return, it's going to be a day of reckoning for all the corrupt, arrogant systems of the world. So, what does that mean for them now? It means they should live as children of the light, children of the day. In other words, live right now as if that future day of justice and hope has already started to dawn. Live with integrity and hope, even when everything around you feels dark. And really, that's the core message that still resonates today. For those first Christians, things like holiness, love, and hope weren't just fluffy, nice ideas. They were a revolutionary act. They were survival tools for a community pushed to the very edge. And it was all powered by this one world-changing belief that Jesus, not Caesar, is the true Lord of the world, and his return is the ultimate hope for everyone and everything. And that really leaves us with a powerful question, doesn't it? When our own world feels like it's falling apart, when we're facing our own challenges or loss or just deep uncertainty, what does it really mean to live like we're people of the day? What does it look like to live with that quiet, defiant confidence that the true king is on his way to make everything new?